Good afternoon and good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our Social Procurement in Action webinar. My name is Giovanni Ferrante and I'll be your host for today. I look after marketing for CIPS in the Australia and New Zealand region. Today we'll talk about something that's very close to our heart, and it's increasingly rising on every organization's agenda, and that is social procurement. And we will have a practical example on how that's been deployed in a big organization, and we'll see some of the benefits they've reaped and some of the approaches they've taken to embed social procurement into their day-to-day operations. We're lucky enough today to have two subject matter experts. We have Mark Daniels from Social Traders. He is the Executive Director for Bioservices. Mark has worked in the field since 2001 and over time has produced former social enterprises, run social enterprises, lobby for social enterprises and helped found Social Traders, Australia's leading social enterprise development organisation. Mark's work now centres on enabling government and business buyers to build social enterprises into their supply chain. Social Traders Marketplace has enabled so far 70 business and government buyer members to work with over 330 certified social enterprises just across FY18 and 19. And the social marketplace, Social Traders Marketplace, enable over 700 disadvantaged job seekers. So quite some impressive numbers. We also have today Monica Miloi. Monica is the Senior Social Procurement Specialist at the Department of Transport, and she's an experienced procurement professional committed to driving positive and social economic outcomes throughout the procurement process. She has over 20 years of experience in end-to-end procurement and category management, and she's been championing the application of social procurement at VicRoads for a number of years now. Monica is passionate about the benefits of social procurement, and we'll hear her sharing some of her experience with VicRoads, and consider its application to be essential in delivering the best value for money and outcomes for the community. Monica has worked in operational and project roles, including procurement transformation projects. And in 2014, she has designed and set up a panel for e-waste services at the University of Melbourne that delivers significant sustainability outcomes. In 2014, she started her journey on social procurement and VicRoads, and we'll share some insights today about that. Most recently, Monica was awarded and recognized for her work in the space of social procurement as the Social Procurement Champion of the Year at the Social Trader 2019 conference. So that's quite a big achievement. The session will be recorded for today, as we always do, and you'll have an opportunity to ask questions at the end and interact with our panelists. We endeavour to get back and answer as many questions as possible. We'll try and keep the webinar to about 40 minutes, and all the questions that we can't answer, we'll endeavour to follow up after the webinar. The recordings will then be shared with everyone that's attended and will be hosted on the CIPS website as well after the fact. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Mark Daniels, who will talk us through some of the fundamentals about social procurement and what that means, and then we will hand over for a bit of a Q&A of Mark and Monica. So over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Gia. Great to be here. Thanks for the invitation to come and speak. We did a session in late November, I think it was, and that was really focusing on an introduction to social procurement, and we had a social enterprise come in, so the Brotherhood of St Lawrence, Give Them a Chance program, and they talked about what they were doing as a social enterprise and how they were responding to social procurement. What we're going to do today is look at it more from a buyer's perspective. So we want to really touch on what best practice looks like in terms of social procurement from a buyer, And Monica's here. We're going to do a bit of Q&A to explore what that looks like from a VicRoads / Department of Transport perspective in Victoria. And I just felt that there are a lot of people who weren't in the last webinar. So I need to just touch base quickly and spend 5 minutes recapping on what we covered in November. So here's a 5-minute recap. Social Traders is a marketplace operator. So we're a not-for-profit. We were created to grow social enterprise, and we do that through running a marketplace where there are now almost 80 buyers in our marketplace, and they're quite diverse, but generally relatively large buyers. Globals, nationals, state agencies, universities, and various other bodies. They are our buyer members. They subscribe to join, and we work with them to make it easier for them to buy from social enterprises. That's our fundamental role. And so we do that through access to databases, networking events. We bring them together so they can learn from each other. We do staff engagement activities like training, networking, and workshops. And we do some strategy work around opportunity analysis and how to realise those opportunities within the organisation. And on the supplier side, we've certified almost 340 social enterprises. Those organisations exist to address disadvantage in some way, shape or form. And they need to meet our definition and requirements to be certified. They get access to the marketplace. They are able to access a range of services from Social Traders as a result of that. Just click through. So we've got a number of buyers. I'm not going to go into this in any detail. Some of you will already be our buyers. This is the sort of range of organisations, about 75 of them, and they are in a whole range of different fields. What I really want to recap on is a couple of basics. So when we're talking about social procurement, we are talking about when organisations use their buying power to generate social value above and beyond the values and of goods and services being procured. That can include buying from social enterprises. It can be buying from Indigenous-owned businesses, Australian disability enterprises, and as you'll see on a future slide, it can be local as well. So social procurement is actually using your spend to deliver some added social value that you are seeking to achieve. So these are the three drivers generally for social procurement. One's keeping money in local economies. So if you're in a rural or a regional area, or if you're in a disadvantaged or under a low socioeconomic community, keeping money in local economies is probably the greatest way that you can actually drive greater wealth in those communities. The second motivator is employment for marginalised groups, and quite often that will focus on, and I'll just actually put the next tab up, it can be direct employment of disadvantaged people, or it can be engaging social enterprises in your supply chain who are addressing disadvantage through their employment or where their profits are directed. And the last motivator is often around economic empowerment. So that's going, there are groups like Indigenous businesses, my understanding is 0.1% of Aboriginal or Indigenous businesses in Australia, are Indigenous owned, but 3% of the population is Indigenous. So the economic empowerment lens is saying, how can we use procurement to create greater economic wealth in communities that are underrepresented in business ownership? So if they're the three levers, here's a schematic of what we're really talking about. And it's a very VicRoads centric one because it's building a road. Traditionally, organisations see procurement as one function and community benefit as a completely separate function, and the two aren't integrated. If you're a government agency, your agency will build roads. It won't help people specifically to get back into the workforce. There'll be some other part of government. If you're a corporate, you do the good stuff through corporate social responsibility, but at the end of the day, procurement is fundamentally about price and risk fundamentally. What we're seeing with social procurement is actually using that procurement function to drive the outcomes, the job creation, the jobs for Indigenous Australians, the economic empowerment, the local jobs as well. I just want to touch on a few things and then we'll get into the conversation with Monica. The challenges that often, and I am really covering this quickly because some of you have heard it before, the common challenges that our buyers face in doing social procurement are things like, this is hard because we're changing from familiar suppliers, okay? So you're asking us to buy from different organisations to what we normally buy from. Another challenge is that social enterprise turns over $5 million a year. The contracts that I'm letting are over $5 million a year. They're $10, $15 million contracts. So how can they possibly fit into my supply chain if they can't bite off the contracts that I'm taking to market in that category? Another issue is that existing procurement practices, standard agreements, contracts are all written in a way where we don't give consideration to social, and then they don't facilitate buying from social enterprises. So we've got pre-qualified panels, or we've got suppliers that are pre-qualified. We would normally go to those organisations. The social enterprises or these Indigenous businesses aren't actually in our normal procurement process. Going out with a different RFT requires us to change the way that we write our RFTs. Our contracts aren't necessarily stipulated in the right way, and so on and so on. A common challenge is that people think about social procurement very late in the process quite often. So if you don't understand the market and what capacity exists in the marketplace, and if you're not building social procurement into your early planning processes, which might be 6 months prior to the RFT going out to market, then you're probably not going to get a really good social outcome. And quite often what we see is the person responsible for social procurement in an organisation, or the people who understand this, are only seeing the RFT a week before it goes out. So changing it at that point or incorporating social into it is really difficult. Another challenge is that social enterprise capacity to respond to standard market approaches is not as strong as some other providers in the market. And I'm generalising here. Some social enterprises, and just use social enterprise interchangeably with Indigenous business here, some of those organisations are really good now at responding to a standard RFT process, but a lot of them aren't necessarily, and they don't have the business development resources that a commercial business might have, for example, because they might be employing disadvantaged people. So they don't actually have the same budget distribution in an organisation to necessarily spend on BD and responding to every RFT that comes over their desk. So they'll be a lot more choosy about what they go for, and their capacity to respond might be less than, so they might not do an RFT response as well, perhaps at times. The last point I wanted to touch on was internal engagement and understanding. Social procurement is a different language to a whole lot of people in organisations. The procurement profession, particularly over the last 30 years, has really focused on risk and price as key drivers in organisations. Now you're starting to add other dimensions to this discussion, like social and environmental and other things. And trying to get people to understand that and buy into that across an organisation is a real challenge. To try and get them to understand the capacity of the marketplace is a challenge as well. So these are the challenges that we face in our work on a regular basis. And I guess I just want to respond to that, and I will give you some more information after I have a chat to Monica. But basically, if you do procurement the way you've always done it, you probably won't get a lot more social enterprises and Indigenous businesses into your supply chain. You have to change the way that you undertake procurement in order to support social procurement within your organisation. And on the other side, I would say social enterprises and Indigenous businesses are getting better at the way that they're responding to what you're asking of them, particularly when you're asking the right sort of questions that trigger them. So if you have no interest in social enterprise or Indigenous business and no mention of social procurement in your RFT, they're probably less likely to go for that tender. But if you've done if you put an RFT together that's quite engaging, stipulates exactly the sort of social impact you're looking for, and that you've thought about social enterprise or Indigenous business in how they'll respond to that tender opportunity, there's much more likelihood that we'll get a successful outcome. Okay, we're just going to play a video to capture the essence of social procurement, and then I'll have a chat with Monica. Okay. Mic's working? Okay. Look, apologies. What Geo just said that we got a comment back that said the sound wouldn't work, wasn't working. So apologies for that. I guess when we leave it set up as a webinar, you might, or we can send links through.
Yeah,
actually,
we can share the video link
okay.
separately. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Needless to say, the story is a lovely story about OC Connections winning more work, well, winning work with VicRoads as a result of VicRoads thinking differently about how they buy, and the jobs that have been created for people who would otherwise be struggling to find work in the mainstream marketplace. One of the things, when Gio invited us to speak today, I was thinking about who we should approach to get as a speaker from one of our buyers. And as you heard at the start, Monica and the VicRoads team won an award from Social Traders in, I think it was August last year. We ran our awards, and it was for the Social Procurement Champion. And what was really exciting about the work that VicRoads had done is they'd significantly grown their spend, but they don't have the biggest spend of our buyers. What was really exciting was the way that they'd actually taken this concept and they had really embedded it across the organisation. Probably the best example we've seen of social procurement being taken and really embedded in an organisation in terms of systems, processes, and all of those other issues that I've just outlined. So, Monica, thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Thanks, CIPS, and thank you everyone for joining us online.
And so I've just got a few questions for Monica. She's going to be the main act for the next 10 or 15 minutes. So Monica, just for people who aren't in Victoria, can you provide a snapshot of VicRoads and the procurement function?
Yes, just before starting, VicRoads has recently joined the Department of Transport and Public Transport Victoria to form the new Department of Transport. In this particular session, I will talk about VicRoads' journey because we are still discovering the other two parts of the business. So VicRoads' journey prior to the merge with the Department of Transport. So to give you an idea, VicRoads spent about 1.7 billion a year, with 85% in building roads, building and construction space, and 15% in goods and services. VicRoads has got a central-led procurement model, meaning that the procurement function provides governance, oversight, and advice, and also manages the pre-qualification scheme and most supplier relationships. And we have over 1,600 buyers in VicRoads, which is a large number of buyers to actually influence through a change such as social procurement. So this is the landscape that we've started our journey on social procurement on.
Yeah, great. So why was VicRoads initially attracted to social procurement? What were the drivers for the organisation?
Yes, so main drivers were probably the culture of VicRoads. So the corporate culture was very strong around the values of care, share, and dare in VicRoads. So these were exemplified very strongly by the leadership team in every occasion. So historically, VicRoads has delivered lots of social procurement or social impact projects such as sustainability, revegetation, using recycled content for our roads. We've delivered social procurement elements to working with traditional owners or to working on cultural heritage and land management. So there were lots of examples in VicRoads already there, but the concept of social procurement was not properly formed until about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
When the procurement team went to a session dedicated to social procurement. So that was probably the prompt for the overall organizational change, the training session on social procurement.
Yeah, good. Was that the one with us?
Was one with you and was one with Supply Nation.
Yeah, great. So can you just go through the steps and timing of introducing social procurement at VicRoads?
Yes, so as I've mentioned, we've had a training session in early 2017, so
Yep.
about 3 years ago. And post the training session, we've decided that social procurement is closely aligned with our values, both personal values and organizational values. and we've decided to do something about it. So we put together a working group, through the discovery process, a working group formed with people with a passion for social impact. For example, we've got on board diversity and inclusion teams, we've got the cultural heritage, we've got the disability support network, we've got the delivery arm of VicRoads. So we looked for champions that were already passionate about this. So we formed a working group, and we've arranged presentations from Supply Nation and Kinaway to our Procurement Governance Committee in June 2017. So just a bit of background, Supply Nation and Kinaway are the accreditation bodies for Indigenous-owned businesses, Kinaway being the Victorian local Chamber of Commerce, Aboriginal Chamber of Commerce, and Supply Nation being the national body for registering and certifying Indigenous-owned businesses. So we've arranged for Supply Nation and Kinaway to present to the Procurement Governance Committee, and we've got the endorsement to start the discovery process to work towards the whole of organization implementation of social procurement. So the planning included undertaking an opportunity analysis, which was very important, included pilot projects. So we ran a couple of pilot projects, and we've developed relationships with key stakeholders and intermediaries such as social procurement, the social traders, and other government organizations. There were no specific resources allocated in June, July 2017. So we've done this on top of our day jobs, which was quite a bit of a challenge. 12 months later, we went back to the Procurement Governance Committee with examples from pilot projects with strong opportunities identified through the process. And we've got 2 resources approved to work on social procurement. So we were probably the first government organization in Victoria, from what I know, with dedicated resources for social procurement. In April 2018, we've had the social procurement framework launched in Victoria, which helped us a lot in our conversations with stakeholders. So a lot of work has been done between June, July 2017 and June, July 2018 to actually engage stakeholders and do the lobbying for social procurement and engage various organizations and actually understand more about what can be done. So,
and that's a great example of it doesn't just happen. It takes a hell of a lot of work behind the scenes. You mentioned something called the Social Procurement Framework. I guess for anyone who isn't aware, in Victoria, they're really the first government who's done an integrated strategy towards social procurement, and they've incorporated Indigenous business, social enterprise, still jobs for disadvantaged cohorts, as well as areas like diversity in the workplace, jobs for people with disabilities, addressing domestic violence and climate change are all wrapped into the social procurement framework. And essentially it's changing the way government buys by now not just saying it's price and risk, but it's price and risk and these other factors that need to be addressed in most tenders actually that would go out to market now. And the adoption is coming through now because a lot of departments have just submitted their own strategies and they'll be implementing them from now on. So it's pretty much whole of government commitment from here on.
It is definitely.
So what's different about VicRoads now and your procurement processes compared to what you were doing before social procurement? What's the change been?
So the main change was that social value actually became one of our key considerations for evaluation. Social impact is an outcome considered alongside price, quality, safety, and other outcomes. So it's no longer a nice to have, it's one of the outcomes that we seek through our tendering process. We have also worked with business areas to include social procurement requirements in all our major contracts. So on one hand, we have the contracts in building and construction over $1 million going out with mandatory social procurement requirements. And we have identified high priority categories for which there is a social benefit suppliers market, for which we ask business areas to consider social procurement elements. So for high priority categories, you must consider. For building and construction over $1 million, you must use.
Great. So it's not universal?
No, we've worked quite closely with our business areas, and we looked for things that are doable actually, and achievable in the first stage. And we've also educated our staff. Over 1,000 people have been trained on social procurement in VicRoads, which is quite a large number. And we've also educated our suppliers. So we've worked with them on evaluation, on supplier briefings, and so on. So we've actually upskilled everyone on social procurement.
Brilliant.
So that's different from when we've started.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, so much greater awareness. So executive buy-in, how did you get that in the organisation?
Executive buy-in was sought from the very beginning of the journey. So through the Procurement Governance Committee, as I've mentioned, it's an executive leadership committee overseeing the procurement function in VicRoads. So that was the engagement from very early in 2017. And we tried to understand what was driving everyone. For some was personal passion for social impact. For others was leadership, and yet for others was meeting targets or policy requirements. So understand your audience. We then targeted every type of audience through specific methods and with specific messages. We went visiting every single site in VicRoads, so all the regions. We presented to leadership teams. We've created videos and posters. We presented to staff forums, and we've had one-on-one meetings. So it was a huge communications piece happening in VicRoads. We've got resources, so we've got the communications team very excited about the concept of social procurement. So we've got the dedicated resources from communications to work with us. So change management was probably the most important, and the approach was to utilize the success from pilot projects to actually deliver the message. If you get a chance, jump onto VicRoads webpage, the external facing webpage, and just Google VicRoads Social Procurement and watch the videos. They are very short videos with powerful messages around what social procurement actually means for the community. So we've used the case studies to build the videos and to build the message. And we found that it's very important for the leadership team to have a clear and concise message around what social procurement is. So our message was that social procurement is important for the whole of government. It can be done. We've had case studies to prove that it can be done. It is closely aligned with our core values of care, share, and dare. And VicRoads has a significant buying power. So we have the power to impact our community. We have a strong and enduring presence across the whole of Victoria. So we basically touch everyone in Victoria. So that was our message, why social procurement is important. So I guess building the message is the key to win the leadership team.
So how has your approach to social enterprise suppliers or Indigenous businesses been different to standard practice?
That's an interesting one because, again, very early in on the journey, we've discovered that there is no blanket approach.
Yep.
So we've tackled every procurement activity in the first year with a different approach. So I can give you an example with grass cutting. We've had to build a supplier's capability and capacity to actually work with VicRoads. So we've started with a smaller tender, which was delivered by one social enterprise. And from that point on, they started working in facilities management and land management or grounds management with other government departments. So that's one example where we actually built a supplier. In another case, we've improved the safety of our suppliers. So we work with the disability enterprise to actually improve their staff safety when they are on site. So that's another example. In another case, we worked with our traditional suppliers to influence them to partner with social enterprises. So an example here would be the carpet replacement in our office buildings. where the incumbent supplier, we couldn't find any social supplier actually big enough or at that point to do the job. However, we set targets in our contracts for all the labor, or 25% of the labor hours, to be done with social, from social background. And our supplier has actually partnered with Scope. Can I mention suppliers?
Yeah.
Has partnered with Scope, and they continue the partnership to deliver other projects. So it's a good case of partnering traditional suppliers with social suppliers. In other cases where the market was strong enough, the social suppliers market was strong enough, we actually issued the tender only within the social suppliers market. Yeah. So if we can ensure competition and value for money, we targeted only social suppliers, for example, in facilities. So we ran a few tenders and quotations only in social supplier space. So different approach for different activities.
Yeah, brilliant. Just quickly, wins to date, what sort of impact have these changes had over the last 2 years or so?
Firstly, everyone in VicRoads will know what social procurement is, at least at that point. So our staff is aware, our suppliers are aware. We've tripled the spend in VicRoads only. We tripled the spend with social suppliers just by dedicating the resources and time. And our suppliers are very much aware of social procurement as well. We've educated suppliers. So.
Brilliant. And just one last question. What are the next steps for VicRoads / Department of Transport, I guess? You can't just talk about VicRoads anymore. What's the next step?
Yes, the next step for Department of Transport would be to roll out social procurement across the whole of DOT. We now cover much more with all the contracts that Public Transport Victoria is managing and Department of Transport is managing. So bigger scope for change. And we've discovered already that we have strong support from the leadership team. Yeah. As strong as we've had in VicRoads. So the biggest challenge this year will be to roll out social procurement.
Train another 1,500 people.
Train another 1,500, different set of buyers, different business areas, different contracts. So big challenge. Looking forward to it.
Brilliant. One of the videos we can't play, but we're going to, was a C-level executive from VicRoads talking about their commitment to it, which we'll make sure goes around afterwards. Look, I just want to finish on 2 slides. One is that, and Monica spoke about this, having a strategy is really important in terms of embedding this. And so that we help VicRoads, we're a consultant to VicRoads in developing a strategy. We covered off on their 6 key areas. And I think that if you're really going to put a social procurement system in place, and in truth, if you really want to do this to the greatest impact, you need a system across the organisation. And I think VicRoads is giving you a great example of what a system looks like. It's root and branch, it's leadership, governance, policy, process, internal engagement, working with opportunities and the tools and resources that you would normally have as a procurement person, making sure your supply chain understands what you're doing and they're responding to that, and then having a measurement and reporting tool so that you can report up on that information. I won't go into this in too much detail. Just click one. And lastly, I'm actually not going to talk too much to this because I'm really aware that we're kind of at the end. I'd rather have your Q&A. But these are some strategies that we talk about at Social Traders. These are just different ways of thinking about your procurement process when you want to buy differently. So thinking about unbundling contracts. So, you know, if you've got the $5 million contract and the social enterprises are only, or Indigenous businesses only turning over 1 or 2 million, could you break off part of that contract and have the social enterprise or Indigenous business deliver it? Sometimes bundling makes sense. I won't go through all of these. We've seen examples of EOI to look at ways that a supplier could respond to this opportunity. Where there is depth in the market, you could have sourcing directly from social enterprises and Indigenous businesses, particularly when it's under the threshold and you can directly source from suppliers anyway. Putting in weightings in contracts around social impact, having evaluation criteria on big contracts like a road, for example, where you put mandatory requirements for subcontracting to social enterprises and Indigenous businesses. Incorporating social enterprises and Indigenous businesses into open panels if you use a panel system, or potentially creating social enterprise and Indigenous business only panels. And we've seen that for things like catering sometimes, because there's depth in the market in certain categories. SRM's really key, having those conversations and declaring your intent and the direction you want to head in and what you'd like your suppliers to, how they can help you in achieving those goals. And then sometimes we get to this area that Monica's been talking about, which is capacity building. So thinking, well, they're not quite there yet, but with a little bit of work, we could get them to the point where we're spending a not inconsiderable amount of money with these organisations. They're just not quite there yet. And then we do a little bit of work with them and they are there. And now they're working not only with us, but with other contractors in the marketplace. So there's a whole range of different thoughts that you can bring to the table. Last slide is really just what we've achieved in the last 2 years. So to give you a sense of what can be achieved, in 2 years, we had $105 million spend with social enterprises. We had 53 buyers at the time and 290 certified social enterprises. That 105 million created 700 jobs for disadvantaged people, which is quite incredible. 220,000 hours of training and employability skills for people who aren't ready for work. $8 million in free or low-cost goods and services, and that's social enterprises who provide those sorts of services. That's their social benefit. And $2 million of funds distributed to charitable purposes. It's probably the most impactful $105 million I've ever seen. So I just want to give you a sense that it's very personal quite often. It's very impactful, and a little bit of change can drive a whole lot of impact as well. Over to you, Gina.
Oh, thank you. I think we're gonna throw it open to the floor and to the attendees to ask questions. It was extremely interesting. So please feel free to submit your questions through the Q&A chat box in the application. We already have a few. I'm going to start with one. This is probably a bit more related to Victoria as a region, but yeah. I know we have like a board that oversees like, you know, the overall approach to procurement from a government perspective, the VGPB. Has there been any sort of translation of the awesome work that you are doing onto other agencies? Has there been any learning that's been passed on to other government department?
Yes, definitely. The whole of government is working on this. We have a working group across government departments, and we share learnings, definitely. We have shared contract templates and all the other elements that we've worked on. So yes, this will roll out across multiple agencies.
And you talked about paying it forward in a discussion we had once. You know, people are coming to you all the time looking for support and advice from other government departments.
Yes, we have trained a few other government departments on their journey as we received training from others in our early days.
Very good. Okay, on to the floor. So we have a question from Cosma. She's asking, how do we link the RFP KPIs to the corporate social responsibility benefits, as sometimes there is a clash between those? It's an interesting one.
It is. Do you want to have the first
Yes, yeah. So how we've done this in VicRoads. So RFP, we've embedded in the tender process, embedded social procurement requirements. So for building and construction, we have all contracts over $1 million going out with a mandatory requirement for social procurement spend. So it's a knockout requirement. So suppliers have to demonstrate to be able to be considered for the tender. They have to demonstrate how they will achieve the 3%. And we are working with suppliers, so we don't just throw them in the deep end. We are working with them through the supplier briefing sessions, giving them all the information that they need about social traders, about Supply Nation and Kinaway, and all the other organizations that can support them on the journey. We talk to them about employment of people from disadvantaged background, and we give them links to organizations that can support them from employment point of view. But we expect in the tender process to see a submission regarding how they will achieve the target on social procurement. Again, it's a mandatory target. So then those targets, those submissions form part of the contract for the successful supplier. So they become a deliverable as any other part of the contract. So that's in roads, building and construction contracts. Again, depending on contract, we adjust the targets and we work with the suppliers and with the business areas. It's not one size fits all. We work very closely with our departments and business areas to actually see what is achievable. So that's how we landed on the 1 million, and depending on the length of the contract as well. And that's how we've landed on high priority categories. So you have to understand your spend and you have to understand your supplier market.
And I think it's a bit about how important is this to you as well, you know, and what we're starting to see amongst a number of buyers is they're attaching a weight to it in every tender. So you're just recalibrating your tender, your RFT requirements to now incorporate, well, social's really important to us, you know, just as important as price and risk. So now it's going to be 5% or 10%. We've seen an example where social was 30% of a tender weighting. So and that's a bit about a realistic view that yes, they can achieve the social outcomes we're seeking and still deliver manage the risk and deliver a good price, incorporate into that. But I think, you know, you do have to be aware that if you're playing with levers, you will have consequences as a result of playing with the levers. And you know, it might mean that there's a slightly higher price sometimes. It may not mean that too.
We did not notice that, so we want to bust that myth of
so
if you do social, if you do social, it will have to be more expensive. It doesn't have to be more expensive. To employ someone from a long-term unemployment base, it doesn't cost you more. You don't pay more. It might be a bit of time consumed in finding those people and contacting the right organizations, but it doesn't have to cost you more.
Absolutely. And as this becomes like, you know, day-to-day sort of practice, you won't need to spend, you know, time looking for those suppliers. We've done a lot of myth busting in our previous session, you know, addressing some of the concerns. So there seems to be, again, sometimes like a wrong idea that, you know, those two benefits, you know, the monetary value or the cost savings and the social outcomes are in clash, but that's not often the case. Interesting, there are a couple of people asking about examples in the IT category, which seems to be like an odd one. Do you guys have anything to share?
Okay. So I think one of the challenges is that IT is just seen as a big bundle. Wow, there are a lot of questions, aren't there, John? IT is seen as a big bundle, you know, so you're using IBM for all of your IT requirements or whoever it is, you know, and I think that there's not going to be an obvious head contractor in our space that will deliver to you if they're a social enterprise, or I don't think there are any Indigenous businesses that would be a head contractor on IT contracts, not the scale at which a lot of the corporates and government departments would buy it. But it's the supply chain where the real opportunities are. And if you allow, you know, Microsoft is one of our buyer members. 3% of their supply chain are Indigenous businesses and social enterprises. So Microsoft can see opportunities in their supply chain to build Indigenous businesses and social enterprises. And so that's where I wouldn't let people off in a particular category, because they all have supply chains and they all have capacity to influence those supply chains. And if I think about IT and our certified social enterprises, we've got social enterprises that do IT repair, that do IT end-of-life management. We've got social enterprises that do software testing. We've got social enterprises that do setup of IT equipment. We've got a whole range of social enterprises that fit beautifully into an IT supply chain. So I don't think you would sort of say this can't happen in this category. We often hear that. I do IT, can't happen in this category. I think there are very few categories where the tier one could not engage social enterprises throughout their supply chains.
And another interesting question from Darren is asking whether, you know, this approach has traditionally been taken from government to create this level playing field. Is there a reason why business can't do the same and, you know, leverage social enterprises to deliver social outcomes?
I read that question slightly differently, and that is, can social enterprise and Indigenous businesses not win work on a standard RFT? And I may be wrong, Darren, so I apologise if I'm not right.
I read it the same. Why do we need to give more opportunities?
Monica, do you want to? I've got heaps of answers. I talk about this stuff all day. Largely because most social enterprises traditionally would not say that they're a social enterprise in an RFT response, because people would look at that and go, what is a social enterprise and what am I getting? And they weren't, you know, so when you said it actually worked against you, generally speaking. What the Victorian government has done, and many of our other buyer members, is they said, well, we actually want to deliver impact through our procurement processes. So how can we change them so that we can deliver that impact through our processes? So let me even go a step further back. VicRoads did, this is my recollection, Monica, ran ABNs through your finance system when you started working with us, and discovered that you were spending $1 million with social enterprises already. So I want to be really clear. Social enterprises have been winning work forever, and social procurement is just something that allows us to scale their impact and give them preference in the marketplace so they can win more work, so that we can deliver more value through our procurement processes. And if you don't change your processes, you will still get social enterprises in your supply chain, whether you know it or not. But this is much more likely to lead to more social enterprises and Indigenous businesses winning work, which, if you're doing this, is what you're seeking to achieve at the end of the day.
I will just touch on the example of grass cutting that we've had recently. Have a look at our website to actually understand the real impact of engaging that business. So that business actually won work on merit, so on price, quality, safety. These requirements are not off the table, especially on roads working and public institutions. Safety is #1 priority, and price is, again, public money and so on. So these are not off the table. So that social enterprise won work on merit. However, when you look at their story, they employ young kids that dropped out of school very early and that are at risk of being long-term unemployed or homeless or so on. So these kids are actually delivering the work. These people, young people, are delivering the work. It's no difference to your quality, safety, price, and everything else. It just gives them a chance. So if you look at that side, you would go out of your way to actually give this company an opportunity to actually quote for business, because that's the first barrier that we've noticed. We invite traditional suppliers without considering anyone else, because we are under pressure of time, so delivery time, cost constraints, and so on. So we go inviting the people that we've always invited. Just give these suppliers a chance to quote. You'll be surprised.
Awesome. Greg's asking how do buyers find suppliers for particular products and services. I guess, we went through, organizations like Social Traders, Kinaway, and the various Indigenous business chambers.
And you can do it without using social enterprises, So if you are working in, VicRoads, you guys are doing a lot of stuff in regional Victoria, for example, where the focus might not be on social enterprise or Indigenous businesses.
Employment from various disadvantaged local or,
Awesome. So it's a philosophical question from Sayad. Is there any scope for a global, social supplier approach, or is this something, as we discussed, more of a local sourcing and joint strategy? What's your view on that?
Look, my comment on that would be that it's becoming global at the moment. Some of our buyers have been working with the Minority Supplier Council in the US, and that's really where they were introduced to social procurement. Might not have been called that, might have been supplier diversity in that language. And that's the NMSDC, so the National Minority Supplier Development Council in the US, is a massive institution that encourages buyers to engage Indigenous business, Native American businesses, Latino American businesses, and African American businesses in their supply chains in the US, for the very reason that they're underrepresented in business ownership and distributions of wealth. And so we've seen it in the US, we've seen it in developing countries. Mining companies have been doing this for as long as they've been operating particularly in developing countries or in remote regions where they create local jobs and local businesses to service them. So I don't think this is new, and a lot of our globals are doing something with us in Australia, and they might be working with Supply Nation as well, and they're working with the NMSDC in the US, and they're working with other, WeConnect, which is the women-owned business. It's a global framework for women-owned businesses. Some of them are working, so it's slightly different in different states, in different jurisdictions, sorry, but there are organisations like us, about 5 around the world, that are like Social Traders in 5 different jurisdictions. So no, I don't think it's just local, but we don't have many international social enterprises, to be really clear, in our space.
If the question was about engaging local suppliers versus international or interstate, just wanted to add that the Victorian Social Procurement Framework is referring to Victorian businesses. So just adding to what Mark was saying. Yes, the movement is international. However, the framework is focused on Victoria.
Yeah. Great.
And I guess as part of the capacity and capability building, there's no reason why a social enterprise can grow to be an international organization. So,
and it's interesting. We've seen social enterprises in the last 2 years in Victoria double and double again. Yeah. So, does it work? It's been incredible at stimulating that sort of activity. And now they're going to other states, and going global wouldn't be out of the realms over time.
Good. I'm glad Mark and Monica got Darren's question right, because Darren commented that was exactly what he was after. Mindful of time, just last question from Adam. Is it easier for government effectively to do social procurement because of the funding, as opposed to a private enterprise, which will have to address shareholders' sort of like concern? I'll just make a very quick comment before I hand over to Zara. It's becoming more and more common that at any level, social sustainability or environmental outcomes are evaluated. We had a case study from US investment funds where not just money that are spent, but money that people wanted to spend have one of the 3 criteria, the sustainability issue. So this is something that's becoming, well beyond government or private. It's becoming just a way of doing business. That's my view. But do you guys have any insight on whether, or maybe some advices on how to sort of reduce those barriers for shareholders?
I've got a few views. I was speaking at an event last week, and someone said to me that they get lower cost of capital when they are doing social and delivering social outcomes. So for their business, that's generally high value. So 2 elements to this answer. One, why do our corporates join Social Traders? Because, to be completely honest, 85% of our buyer members are corporate, close to 85 anyway. They're joining for one of 4 or 5 reasons. One, they see it as competitive advantage in the marketplace. So the market's moving and they want to do that. 2, it's about staff engagement and staff attraction and retention. And so that's becoming more important to people exiting university and looking for a job. Another area is around cost of capital. So shareholders are now expecting this. Another is community. The community is now expecting that business will do the right thing in terms of, or look at how they can maximise their positive externalities. We also, I guess the second thing for this, for me, is that for government, this really makes sense because it's an efficiency pitch. If we can buy a road for the same amount that we would have paid anyway and get extra jobs for disadvantaged people through that, that's a very efficient way of us buying. And Monica's already said, no extra cost, and you're spending millions of dollars with social enterprises. So there's a significant return to the organisation in doing that. We are now seeing tier 1s to government being excellent at this because, in fact, our biggest spenders are all tier 1s. And those tier 1s are now responding to the fact that government has changed. And probably the greatest thing government has actually done is create a framework. The government departments will change their spend, but their tier 1s will be the biggest changes in the way that they spend, because that's where most of the contracts would sit. Do you want to chip in?
No, fair enough. Yeah, we don't believe it's easier in government to change our procurement processes, because we are like every other organization. We have rules around what you can buy, when you can buy, and from whom you can buy, and so on. We are also bounded to state purchasing contracts, which limit our options. So we have to be creative as any other organization.
So in a nutshell, it's not about where you work, whether it's public or private. It's just a willingness to do so and make a difference.
Yeah.
It's been a fantastic session. So thank you both, Monica and Mark, for the awesome insight, and thank you everyone for attending. We will continue to talk about social procurement in different forms, and some of the questions that haven't been answered, we'll endeavor to get back to you. Again, invaluable session. Feel free to share the recordings with colleagues and peers and spread the voice of something that's becoming increasingly important and the right thing to do. So thanks again. Thanks, Monica and Mark.
Thanks,
and
Jim.
to the next session. Good day, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.